Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I must say at the outset that I find it quite disturbing what I've heard for the last 40 minutes. Disturbing not from the point of view of there's any confusion of fact or anything whatsoever for the government to have to answer. The desperate cries at the end of a submission, at the end of a debate to say, I'm not casting aspersions, but then go on to cast aspersions at the Australians who have assisted us in a time of need, and to say that the Australian government and people are taking us for fools. Well, I put it very clearly here on the Hansard in the Senate today that the Australian government and people are doing no such thing, and this government takes great umbrage to any allegation, accusation that is being cast and aspersions being cast, not at us, but at the Australian people and the Australian government at the outset. I think what sums up Senator Mark, and he's of course retreated from the chamber, what sums up his whole contribution is one of confusion and confusion of thought. Even during his contribution, he referred to EFIC, and he said EFIC has now been renamed something to do with defense. EFIC was renamed in 2019 to Export Finance Australia. And I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to know that EFIC is a government-backed Export Finance Australian company, and it is part of the government apparatus in Australia. And I will come to why it is that the government of Trinidad and Tobago is relying upon EFIC for loan financing in the current circumstances compared to what happened in the period of 2010 and 2015. Because you see, Madam Speaker, one of the ways you can protect, Madam President, one of the ways you protect against corruption, I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to take note here. One of the ways you protect against corruption in the advancement of a contract is to have an independent overseer. EFIC in this situation is an independent overseer. EFIC is the company, it is the bank that will be disbursing the money to Austal. They will only disburse money to Austal if EFIC is satisfied, one, that it is value for money, and two, that the money should be disbursed. And I will speak later on about what the government did between 2010 and 2015 with the OAS contract, which was the largest infrastructure contract in Trinidad and Tobago, estimated at $7 billion, and why the UNC government disbursed cash and did not take any loan financing for it, and many other contracts where they refused to have any independent financier or any independent overseer. And EFIC has nothing to do with Trinidad and Tobago. At the outset, I will also say that when one enters into an initial discussion with respect to cost, there's a base price. When you start to add on certain items or turn certain wheels and make certain adjustments, the price either goes up or it goes down. It is the same thing like anyone ordering a car. It starts off at a base price. You then say, well, I want a sunroof, I want this type of ignition, I want leather seats. The price begins to rise. And that is all that it is in this instance. There is absolutely nothing untoward. Furthermore, I also say that the price that I gave to people of Trinidad and Tobago during my budget debate during the Standing Finance Committee of the budget is the correct price. And it is $41 million US per vessel. We have absolutely nothing to hide. The additional items, so each vessel, and I'm saying it here for the last time, the final price after negotiation and after the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force through its Coast Guard added the type of communication system. And let the people know, for many years, Trinidad and Tobago's police service, defense force, and all of its law enforcement agencies, the fire service, prison service, use the Motorola system for service. Woe and behold, in or around 2014, and we still cannot get an explanation, there was this sudden change to the Harris system under the UNC government. And it meant that now everybody in the prisons, in the fire service, in the police service, in the Coast Guard, in the defense force had to change their telecommunication system, their walkie-talkies, as lay people may know it, from Motorola that had been used for decades to now the Harris system. Wow. Australians use the Motorola system. So one of the additional costs that took us up from the original estimated base price is because we have to change to the Harris system. And there were a number of other things to be put onto the vessel to make it a better vessel for the waters of Trinidad and Tobago that ended up in a contract being signed by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the Permanent Secretariat, the Ministry of National Security, along with Austal, being overseen by EFEC in Australia at a price of $40.9 million US per vessel. And then there's a delivery cost. Because you see, you're not comparing apples and apples. And Senator Mark well knows this. There is no delivery cost to sail a vessel from Austal in Australia to the Border Patrol or the Australian Navy in Australia. Lest he has forgotten, Australia is thousands of miles away from Trinidad. So there is a delivery cost to deliver the vessels to Trinidad and Tobago of US $2 million, and we negotiated that downwards. There is also something called logistics support, and he's taking in front in his contribution, Senator Mark, saying don't come and tell me about maintenance, etc. But the reality is we have negotiated something called logistics support for the period of a year, which are spares and for persons to be here to ensure that the vessels are working properly in the first year, and that is also included at a cost of $2.7 million US. So all of the old talk about that the cabinet note or the cabinet minute talks about that there will be an in-service support for 5 years in a cabinet note to come, there is nothing untoward with that. There is nothing contradictory to the contract that was signed for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So the cost per vessel is $40.9 million US. Madam Speaker, in the effort to mislead the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I am certain that Senator Mark got his information with respect to the Cape-class vessels built in 2015, or the contract signed in 2015 for delivery in 2017 of 2 Cape-class vessels for the Australian Defence, and he quotes 63 million and claims it's Australian dollars. It is not Australian dollars. When you look at, and I'm sure he did a Google, right? Because if you Google it, anybody Googling it, I invite all of Trinidad and Tobago to go now on Google and read Wikipedia, which is obviously where he got it from. In that article, A before a dollar sign means Australian. When there is no A before the dollar sign, they're referring to US dollars. So in that same article, they refer to Australian dollars using an A and a dollar sign. But when they say 63 million, it is US dollars. So at the outset, the attempt to mislead the population of Trinidad and Tobago through this Senate in saying that it is $63 million for 2 Cape-class vessels, 63 million Australian dollars, is false. It is typical of Wiley and Cambridge Analytica type information. And then secondly, I want to put the people of Trinidad and Tobago on notice. When he made this false cry and this scream, this requires a criminal forensic investigation. By all means, you can investigate from here to the moon and back on this. There will be nothing untoward to be found. But I remind the people of Trinidad and Tobago of a little historical information that I myself didn't know, but I was reminded about by my leader recently. When a previous P&M administration went through a transparent tender process, a competitive tender process, to get 2 offshore patrol vessels to protect our borders, at that time, go back and check the record and you will see the same Senator Mark, after it went through a competitive tender process, and 2 offshore patrol vessels were contracted to be purchased from Vosper Thornycroft, which was later bought out by BAT in the United Kingdom. The same Senator Mark screamed, God alone knows where, and said he was writing to the Serious Crime Office in the United Kingdom. Investigate, he's laughing now, but this is their modus operandi. He should ask that same office or the now National Crime Agency to investigate his colleagues or his previous colleagues who are now before the criminal courts to deal with fraud in relation to legal fees. See if that isn't traced back to Anand Ramlogan and Gerald Ramdeen. Why they don't ask the National Crime Agency to see where those fees, the $1.4 billion and the 10% tax that was put on, where that ended up? But no, this is the modus operandi of the UNC at the time.
No. Minister, I need to caution you about matters that are before the court, okay?
Thank you very much. This is the modus operandi of Senator Mark and the UNC. So on this occasion, when in the most transparent matter, the Prime Minister told the country from day one, at every step of the way that I will show in a short while, what was being done on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago to procure 2 vessels for the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. What happened? The UNC wrote to the Australian government, wrote to the opposition as well as the Attorney General's office to ask for an investigation. As I say, this is straight out of their playbook. But I want to remind the people of Trinidad and Tobago through you, Madam President. On Friday, the 11th of January 2019, in the other place, the Honourable Prime Minister made a statement to the House. This is in January of this year. And this statement will remind the people of Trinidad and Tobago how every step of the way these 2 Cape-class vessels came to be and how the government was transparent. Unlike, and we'll get to the Chinese vessel, when stumbling on a dock somewhere in China, a former prime minister saw a boat and literally said, I want one of those. And that, give me one of those. And that was procurement, UNC style. Let me tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago, stumbling on a dock, let me tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago how we came to get these 2 Cape-class vessels. During the margins of the CARICOM leaders meeting in July 2017, the Honourable Julie Bishop MP, who was then the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Australia, invited our Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago to visit Australia during the last quarter of 2017. However, he couldn't go at that time. Then, it is well known, Madam President, that 2 of the best international shipbuilders, and in particular fast ferry builders, are INCAT and Austal from Australia, with whom we in Trinidad and Tobago already have developed commercial relationships. In fact, we are very familiar with INCAT and Austal vessels. Both the Trinidad and Tobago Express and Trinidad and Tobago Spirit are INCAT fast ferries. The water taxis servicing the route between Port of Spain and San Fernando are Austal vessels. The Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard has 6 fast patrol vessels that are Austal built. And I pause there. During the period of 2010 to 2015, when this country took delivery of those 6 Austal fast patrol vessels, and they were being utilized in our waters to secure the same borders that there were a lot less problems in during that period of time. Let the country know that the UNC did not maintain the fleets. They allowed those vessels to be run down. And when we came in as an administration, much to my embarrassment as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, we found those Austal vessels parked up at Hartscott and Chagaramas at a Coast Guard base, some of them now infested with vermin because they could not be used. And when I asked the Coast Guard, why weren't these vessels maintained? You need to patrol the borders. We are having illegal firearms coming across and narcotics coming across our maritime borders. What happened? The Coast Guard told us that they were not provided with the money nor the wherewithal to engage in new maintenance contracts for those Austal vessels. So the first question the people of Trinidad and Tobago need to ask themselves is, why did the UNC cancel the OPV contracts and didn't allow those vessels to come in here, but keep the helicopters to fly from Philippines to Port of Spain? 2, why did they not maintain the existing Coast Guard vessels that were made to patrol our borders, the 6 Austal patrol vessels? Why did they not give the Coast Guard the wherewithal to renew the maintenance contracts for those vessels? Right. Ask yourselves, people of Trinidad and Tobago, why those actions by the UNC government were taken to frustrate any proper law enforcement being done on our seas in Trinidad and Tobago. You want to talk about vessels? Let's talk about the Chinese vessel. And then I put on record as well that the only time the UNC rushed to get vessels, marine vessels, to give to the Coast Guard was coming up to the 2015 election. And it started, as I say, stumbling on a dock somewhere in China and ordering a wholly inappropriate boat, give me one of those. And I subsequently found out by an advisor on that trip, it wasn't give me one, it was give me two. But fortunately, by the time they got back to Trinidad and there was some sobriety on a plane, or maybe when they got here, the decision was taken to only get one. But that is procurement UNC style. And the country did not know until the vessel was arriving in Trinidad or about to arrive that that is what happened. They then rushed to purchase 6 Daemon vessels. I want everyone to listen. They purchased and they boast about it, but we got 6 Daemon vessels for the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. Let the people of Trinidad and Tobago know now. The newspaper report that was published recently is true. So the procurement via the UNC style, and we didn't call for no criminal forensic investigation, but bet your best dollar, Madam President, the authorities, the international authorities, not the Trinidad and Tobago authorities, the Dutch authorities are conducting a criminal investigation and a forensic investigation into the acquisition of the Daemon vessels by a UNC government. Not Trinidad and Tobago, the Dutch government and the Dutch law enforcement authorities are investigating the United National Congress procurement of 6 Daemon vessels. And we will hear at the end of that the hundreds of millions of dollars more that were purchased and where the money went. Because you see, in this instance, not a cent more of Trinidad and Tobago taxpayer money is being sent than the absolute value of those 2 Austal Cape-class vessels. So to get back to the story as to how Trinidad and Tobago ended up in a contractual arrangement with an Australian company called Austal for the purchase of 2 Cape-class vessels, and the financing being done by a Australian government organization called EFIC, who we have a good credit rating with because we used EFIC to purchase the previous Austal fast ferries, as well as the fast ferries between the water taxis between San Fernando and Port of Spain. So we had good credit ratings. And of course, EFIC are the ones who will disburse the money to Austal. EFIC are the ones who will make sure the vessels are being built according to spec. They will not disburse the money to Austal unless it's value for money and unless it is properly built. And that is the protection that this government took for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But it's not only that. So to get back to the story, at Chogam in April in London, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in London, April 2018, both Minister Moses, our Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, and Minister in the Ministry of National Security, as well as the Prime Minister, met in the margins with the then Australian Prime Minister, Mr. Turnbull, and the Australian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ms. Bishop. And the conversation in the margins was that Trinidad and Tobago was interested in purchasing 2 fast ferries. As I said, our previous fast ferries were from INCAT, and we have Austal vessels. And the Australian Prime Minister at the time said that they would assist Trinidad and Tobago in getting these vessels. And Madam Speaker, right there and then, the Australian Prime Minister agreed that Australia would do what it could to assist. And Madam Speaker, we are grateful. As a people of Trinidad and Tobago, we are grateful, as well as the government, we are grateful. And Prime Minister Turnbull then further informed Minister Moses and the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago that the Australian government had recently taken a decision to establish a specific $1 billion fund, a defense grant fund for the financing of the purchase of military equipment from Australia and Austal, and that Austal built naval, military, and defense vessels. and the purchase of such an Austal military vessel would qualify for under this fund. So you see, it is the Australian Prime Minister at the time who said, listen, Australia has just declared a new defense fund, and if you purchase naval vessels from Austal in Australia, you would qualify for this fund, and it is EFIC who will disburse the fund. That is the birth, that is the genesis of this. And then in May 2018, the Prime Minister led a delegation, including Minister Moses and myself, to Australia and China. Whilst there in Australia, every single day when we went to any meeting with any entity, immediately thereafter, Madam President, and out of the office of the Prime Minister, a media release was put out, including photographs of who we were meeting with. Because you see, that is transparency. So the Prime Minister leading his delegation made sure on a daily basis to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I've met with Austal, these are the people I've met with, these are the discussions. I met with INCAT, these are the people I met with, these are the discussions. I've met with EFIC because we met with the executives at EFIC when we were in Australia to tell them we intend to seek financing from them for 2 fast ferries and for these Cape-class vessels. Again, published. It is there on the record. It can't disappear from the record. So contemporaneously, whilst the Prime Minister is conducting the nation's business, he is telling the nation thousands of miles away who he's meeting with and what about. That has never happened. In 2010 to 2015, that didn't happen. It couldn't happen. Because you can't say, I was on a Chinese dockyard and I say, give me one of these. You can't tell us up to now who negotiated with Damon for the vessels and where the money went. But you have the audacity to come, once again, because there's nothing. I understand acts of desperation, you can see it a mile off. So there is nothing to hold on to. There is nothing where, with any sufficiency of evidence or any reality of situation or factually, they can point to the PNM now from 2015 to 2019, going into 2020 and say, look, that is a corrupt transaction. So today it is a backtrack and a backpedal. I ain't cast no aspersions. Maybe the Australian people take us for fools, but I need to know the price. The price was stated, and the prices before were the estimates, and as we went through it, leaving the Coast Guard and the public servants to negotiate and then verifying it through people like EFIC that this is the correct cost. We came with the final cost of $40.9 million US per vessel. There's then a delivery cost and a cost for something we call logistics support, which is spares and parts for a purpose of for the period of a year for the provision of these things. Madam Speaker, in Australia in May 2018, Minister Moses, the Prime Minister, and myself met with the then Prime Minister Turnbull, the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ms. Bishop, as well as the Minister of Trade and Industry for Australia. And again, the discussions were, how can we access this defense fund? And the Prime Minister of Australia, I can be corrected by Minister Moses if I'm wrong, told us we would be the first country to access this fund, but there were some islands in the South Pacific that were also looking to get the Cape-class vessels. We toured a Cape-class vessel when we were there, but none of us are experts. We don't take it amongst ourselves. So what did we do as soon as we got back to Trinidad? We asked the then Chief of Defense Staff, who was a former commanding officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, as well as to take an expert from the Coast Guard and to go down to Australia, to go and look at the Cape-class vessel, to interrogate the Cape-class vessel, and to come back and advise us in Trinidad and Tobago. Pause. As soon as the Prime Minister got back to Trinidad, as grueling a tour as that was, the next day, he went before the public of Trinidad and Tobago in a press conference with the media sitting there that they can ask any question, and he told the people of Trinidad and Tobago what it is he had done, where he had been, what we were looking to do to get these vessels. And during the period of June 24th, 2018 to July 1st, 2018, Madam President, a 2-member delegation from the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force visited Australia on behalf of the government and the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The delegation comprised Rear Admiral Hayden Pritchard, then Chief of Defence Staff, as I said, who was a former commanding officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, and Lieutenant Commander Rajesh Budu, the engineering officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. The purpose of their visit was to conduct an assessment of Austal's Cape-class patrol boat and to determine its suitability for use by the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. Focus was also placed upon the vessel's sustainability and cost-effective maintenance, which would bring forth optimum utilization. The Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force, Madam President, produced a report dated the 3rd of July 2018 on the Cape-class patrol vessels. So these 2 officers put it in writing. They produced an independent report and found that the vessel, quote, would be quite appropriate for operation within the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, unquote. And it was recommended that 2 Cape-class patrol vessels should be acquired as they could contribute significantly to and enhance the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard's operations. Madam Speaker, coming back from that, the Prime Minister and Cabinet then appointed a Cabinet Evaluation Committee to review the proposals received from INCAT and Austal. Again, we told the population about this at the time in June 2018. I remind the population that the composition of that committee were the Honourable Stuart Young, the Honourable Major General Retired Edmund Dillon, who was then the Minister of National Security. I was the chairman. Senator Honourable Dennis Moses, Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Minister in the Ministry of National Security. Senator the Honourable Robert LaHunt, Minister of Public Utilities. Colonel Retired Lyle Alexander, Chairman of the Port Authority. Mr. Steve Gardner, Deputy Chairman of NIDCO. Mr. Marvin Gonzalez, the Director of Legal Services at the Ministry of Works and Transport. Captain Singh, Deputy Director and Technical Head of Maritime Technological Cooperation Center at UTT, and Mr. Demi John Cruikshank, Tobago businessman. And that committee met with Austal and INCAT, negotiated with them, interrogated them as to the type of vessels, what would be best, etc., and then made recommendations to Cabinet. After the recommendations were made to Cabinet, and Cabinet accepted that they should buy 2 fast ferries, 1 from Austal, 1 from INCAT, and a number of patrol vessels from Austal. What then happened, we didn't leave it there. We then set up another committee to go and negotiate the best possible prices for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that committee was as follows. Mr. Herbert George, the chairman of NIDCO. Mr. Steve Gardner, the deputy chairman of NIDCO. Mr. Steve Garib Singh, the acting president of NIDCO. Ms. Tara John, the senior legal officer of NIDCO. Mr. Demi John Cruikshank, a businessman. Colonel Retired Lyle Alexander, the chairman of the port. Mr. Walker from UTT, who is a maritime expert. Mr. Marvin Gonzalez, the Director of Legal Services at the Ministry of Works and Transport. We didn't stop there. We didn't hire the local lawyer who is in all the transactions, and I'm sure one of my colleagues will talk about. Right? We hired a Mr. Andreas Schickler, a partner at Haynes and Boone, CDG LLP of London, United Kingdom, an expert in maritime matters. Again, an independent person with no strings and no ties. And that person, he is the one who then negotiated on behalf and assisted with the legal expertise needed to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Not like a Ramdeen, not like a Anand Ram Logan, not like the others who sit on that side. This was an expert. This is somebody who's recognized, and that is what this government did to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Coming out of that, preliminary prices were agreed, orders were placed. And as I say, Madam Speaker, I'll take the opportunity just to recirculate a copy of the Prime Minister's statement dated the 11th of January, 2019, to put it once again on the record how transparent these transactions were. And I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for them that they have to try and look all over the place to find something untoward, to find some questionable transaction. It is not going to be this one. Let me explain, Madam President, with the time that I have left. what it is and why it is that this motion was really brought, and to remind people the difference between the transaction that we're looking at today that can stand up to any scrutiny and the transactions of past. As I say, there's now an international forensic criminal investigation, the same type being called for into the procurement of the Damon vessels during the period of 2010 to 2015. Fact. Not by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, by another sovereign government. Fact. The Chinese vessel procured on a stumbling stupor on a Chinese dockyard. Give me one of those, give me two of those. Fact. Irrefutable fact. Now I want to talk to the people of Trinidad and Tobago about the procurement of 2 helicopters by the UNC government. Madam President, the people of Trinidad and Tobago need to know that in the period 2013 to just before the election in 2015, the UNC government saddled them with 2 helicopters, the purchase of 2 helicopters. One, and worse yet, in the contracts that the expert attorneys, you want to ball names, the expert attorneys, including the then Attorney General Anand Ramlogan, negotiated for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, were contracts with no termination clause. How could you enter? I ask all of the independent senators who are members of the bar. How can you ever enter into a commercial contract with no termination clause? And you know what happened, Madam President? 2 helicopters, one for the whole term was grounded in a hangar in Delaware because it couldn't be flown from Delaware to Trinidad because they couldn't find the papers, the certification for the helicopter. When we interrogated that, it was a rushed contract. Take out the termination clause out of the contract, saddle the people of Trinidad and Tobago to be paying over $200,000 per month for a helicopter grounded in Delaware that we never got use of. UNC style. The next helicopter that made it to Trinidad, a few months after it made it to Trinidad, lost certification. Again, no termination clause. People of Trinidad and Tobago could not get out of it. That is procurement and contract UNC style, not P&M style. No maintenance contract. So recently we've had to settle the litigation because we refused to pay. And we figured, let us fight it and see what we can recover for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So we never got use of those 2 UNC helicopters. But the people of Trinidad and Tobago paid millions of US dollars. Let's talk about the OAS contract. And I want to remind the people of Trinidad and Tobago and why the OAS contract, because it was the single largest infrastructure project in Trinidad and Tobago, $7 billion. The government of the time, the UNC government, decided to fund it via cash. And the reason for that is because they did not want any oversight over the disbursement of the $7 billion. Meaning that if you went to IDB, you went to the IFC or any independent bank, they would appoint an engineer, a quantity surveyor, to protect their interests, to make sure that every request for payment is a proper request. The UNC didn't do that with $7 billion cash of our taxpayers' money. And worse yet, OAS, the contractor that they found, went into bankruptcy in Brazil, swirled in criminal investigations and forensic investigations that they like. And what happened, Madam President? A decision was taken on Friday before elections. Elections in 2015 were on the 7th of September. Work it backwards. Sunday is the 6th, the 6th, the 5th, on the 4th of Friday.
One, please, relevance, Madam President. This is a motion dealing with procurement of vessels.
Minister, continue, please.
Much. The people of Trinidad and Tobago need to know on the last working day before a general election, the UNC gave away their rights and took out the ability of the government to terminate the OAS contract on the grounds of bankruptcy. No one with any commercial half a brain would do that. But if you engaged in corruption, you would. And that is what the UNC did. The QREP interchange. We came in as a government and shaved $300 million off the UNC price. $300 million. Where was that money going to go? Tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, don't come here with falsehoods, mixing up US dollars with Australian dollars. Tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago where the
Minister, you have
OAS
5
money
more
went.
minutes.
How much?
5 more minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. And tell the people where the $300 million for the Curab interchange were going to go. CDA leases. CDA leases, Mr. Vice President. Let Senator Mark tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago on the 6th of September, 2015, which is the Sunday night before a general election on Monday the 7th, how many leases were signed at the CDA giving our land away? And that continued. Some of the leases are dated the 7th of September. And when we inquired, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. That is procurement and giving away state assets, UNC style, on the night before the general election, into the morning of the general election. So on the 6th and 7th of September 2015, that is what they did. But they come here today and they throw figures around, all of which have been answered. And we've answered what the price is. And they could go from here to high heaven and that will not change. And the people of Trinidad and Tobago will get the value for that 40.9 million. But I am waiting for the authorities and the international authorities to tell us about the Damon vessels they bought. I am waiting for them to tell us about the legal fees and the bills and stuff that took place. We now know that on the last working day before an election, again they tried to make sure that the people of Trinidad and Tobago got the short end of the stick with the largest infrastructure program construction ever in Trinidad and Tobago, $7 billion. The Beetham wastewater. We are now saddled with over $963 million of cash, NGC cash. What is the National Gas Company doing building a wastewater plant in Beetham? 960, and it is now valueless because nobody could take it to take wastewater to make it potable water or any water that we can use. And to build a pipeline down to Point Lisas will more than double the cost of the project. And that financier of theirs who got that contract hid immediately in Panama and continues to hide in Panama. And what did we do as a government? On the eve of Christmas Eve, the 23rd of December 2015, I led the charge on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago and froze $180 million of SIS's.
Point of order. Standing Order 46.1 is totally irrelevant to the motion.
Thank you very much. The truth hurts.
What nonsense you talking?
So in $180 million of their financier SIS's assets are frozen and were frozen. That is what we talk about. And every time I come here, they scream and they shout these things. They personalize, but that has nothing to do with me. And that is a young person's life. But you know, what is obnoxious about him and about the UNC is they continuously lie on the streets,
Standing Order
they lie in the
46.6,
Parliament,
Mr.
they lie in the
President.
Senate.
Sit down. The member said...
You are obnoxious.
Senator Baker, Senator Baker, sit down now. Sit down. Senator Baker, sit down. What just happened in this chamber will not happen again. Senator Obika, I am on my legs. All right, Senator Obika, thank you very much. Please exit this chamber now. Senator Obika, please remove him. Please remove him from this chamber. Could you please remove him from this chamber? Remove him from this chamber.
You allow him to call me an asshole. You have no behavior. You allow this man
Continue, Minister.
Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, what I have just seen is the most despicable type behavior that is possible, not only in a Senate chamber, but anywhere outside. Unless anyone harbors any, for a moment, any mistake in their mind, this had absolutely nothing to do with race. That is always the card the UNC plays. The behavior, and what is ironic, Mr. Vice President, on the second day when the world is saying that there should be no gender-based violence, we saw a young man scream and shout at one of the women on this side, Senator Batiste Primus, one of our senior and one of the persons who leads us in the Senate, to shout at her all the way out the chamber, shut your mouth. That behavior is not going to be tolerated by this side, Mr. Vice President.